Welcome to the Reddit library. What celebrities have you encountered that were either really nice or really horrible? When I was younger, my grandmother and I ran into Robin Williams eating alone in a Whole Foods. We approached him and introduced ourselves, and he immediately cleared a space for us to sit and chat with him. I was pretty young at the time, so he spent most of the time trying to make me laugh by doing voices. I may have been too young to truly appreciate it at the time, but looking back I can easily say it's one of the greatest moments of my life, and Robin has always had a special spot in my heart because of it. Flavor Flav ate at the restaurant I work at once. He made a huge deal about having to sit somewhere private because he didn't want any attention. When it came to pay his bill, he tried to pay with a prepaid Visa that did not have enough money on it. Edit, spelling sounds pretty on brand. I met Vin Diesel at a truck stop diner when I was a kid. It was like 4 in the morning and me, my grandpa and Vin and his friend were the only ones in the diner, and we ended up getting sat at the table next to them. Vin and a friend were getting ready to go on some fishing trip, which was made obvious by the clothes they were wearing. My grandpa struck up a conversation about fishing with him, completely oblivious to who he was. He was a really nice guy and apparently knew a great deal about fishing techniques. I was a bit geeked out and didn't say much or contribute to the conversation, but I spent the next hour of our road trip explaining to my grandpa who Vin Diesel was and why it was a huge deal we just met him. I bet for Vin it was probably refreshing to have a casual conversation with someone about a personal hobby that didn't center around his celebrity status. Met Dave Chappelle a few years back. Long story short, a friend of a friend got me and 2 friends into an after party. We were sitting at the bar when his manager offered us some shots. We talked with his manager for a while. Then Dave sat down near us. Dave was kind of sitting by himself, and he looks over at us and goes, "What's going on, fellas?" And we talked to him for about an hour. We thanked him for coming to our town, talked about music, sports, all kinds of stuff. Super cool dude. One of my favorite memories. Dude. To cement that Dave is a cool ass MF, my friends and I were at his Chicago show when he was supposed to film a special for HBO, and it was on my actual birthday. The venue was pretty intimate and only had a few chairs surrounding the stage with everyone else standing. We got there early enough to be one of the first row standing. Right after the opening act he came out and immediately noticed us and asked if we were all Filipinos. Well, he definitely guessed right. He started talking about how we are his family and went right into the details about his family, the food, culture and his own family, like having a humorous conversation during his set. Pretty surreal. Anyways, after a killer show, everyone was filtering out when one of the producers stopped us and asked if we can be in some of the B-roll footage along with Cat Williams, since he was also there checking out the show. Of course, we agreed and sat next to him. As soon as it was over, Dave was on stage smoking a joint, and I told him it was my birthday that night. He asked what my name is. I said, Amur Waimoy. He then grabbed the microphone, and with everyone else still around he said, "Today's Amur Waimoy's birthday, and I'm buying shots for everyone." Got to do a shot with him. One of the best random birthday moments ever. I served Daniel Radcliffe his dessert at an event and tripped and spilled some of it on him, probably due to seeing that I was serving Daniel Radcliffe, and he stood up and started apologizing profusely to me. Was very sweet and asking if I was okay. The correct British response. I like how fame never seemed to give him a big head. From what I understand, fame almost destroyed him. The stress of being Harry Potter and the uncertainty as the film series ended contributed to a fairly serious drinking problem. I was happy to learn that he's been sober since 2010. More power to him. He's a really strong person. Seriously, so many child stars fall prey to the dreaded child star syndrome and go off the rails hard once their big break roles end, but he really overcame it and has blossomed since 100% one of my most respected actors in my book. When I was a teenager, I met Neil Armstrong at a retirement ceremony that my dad brought me to. It was at a museum. and it was a private event. There was time for everyone to wander the museum, and my dad saw Mr. Armstrong looking at one of the planes that my dad helped design. Nobody else around. They struck up a conversation and he'll ask me questions about what I was studying and how I felt about the work my dad did. My dad worked on classified planes when I was much younger. He seemed like such a gentle guy to me. A bunch of other men suddenly joined us and started asking him for autographs, which he declined. It seemed to snap him out of his happy mood, and he kind of shut down and walked away. At that time I thought he was a bit of a jerk for not saying goodbye or anything, but I recently read about the hard time he had with fame, and I guess it makes sense. Genuinely amazing that I got to meet him, and one-to-one, with your dad. At that he'll always be a one-of-a-kind for what he achieved, so you should feel very lucky to have met him. Thanks. My dad was thinking the whole time I should ask for an autograph, but he realized after the crowd showed up that the best you would have gotten from him was a conversation, and my dad got that. Nothing to put on your mantle, but a special moment still. Went with my parents to a function for some charity group and we shared a table with Ice-T. Super nice guy, down to earth, and not high on himself. He has a mouth on him, but when he found out my dad is a retired preacher never heard a bad word again the rest of the night. I ended up talking music, and how he goes from rap to metal. Man is cool, and knows his sh*t about the metal and punk scene. My husband and I were wandering around Philly a few years ago, and Don Cheadle was walking toward us. We both stopped, and turned as we watched him go by. After he passed us, he turned around with a big smile, and waved/winked. I just thought, that was pretty cool. Boom, you looking for this? I met Miss Dolly Parton when I was just a wee kid in Illinois. I've described it as being like meeting the sun. She was just so happy and warm and wonderful, and she was the first person I'd met in real life with a southern accent. I was working on a set once where John C. Reilly acted as one of the main characters. It was a pretty small set and low budget, not even sure if the show ever aired, so we all found ourselves working closely together for the most part. I sat across from him during lunch one day and we chatted for a bit about random stuff. The guy talks the same way he acts, which is why I think he plays such a great character in any comedy, because he quite literally plays his own attitude in many roles, at least it seems. But anyway, he was a very nice and down-to-earth guy. I found it hard not to giggle every time he spoke, because I just couldn't shake the image in my head of all the roles he's played. I met a few celebs working as an event photographer for fundraisers from time to time. Chevy Chase, well, the stories are true. He was a huge jerk. Jamie Lee Curtis was one of the sweetest people I've ever met, bar none, and easily the nicest celeb I met working the camera. Very considerate and thoughtful person. She kept checking with us to see if she could do anything for us, or if we needed any more shots she could help with. Great sense of humor too. Jamie Lee Curtis seems to do a good job remembering her extras. They did a bit on James Corden's show and she picked out the lady that did a scene with her several years ago. My mom and sister met The Rock when he was still a wrestler. They had a couple car seats and tons of bags, having a hell of a time getting off the plane, and people were waiting, and then this massive guy offered to carry some things for them, and they happily took the help. He grabbed some bags and held the baby carrier with my niece in it and helped them off the plane and left. After, people kept going up to them asking how they knew The Rock, and they were very confused until someone explained who he was. Everything I ever hear about him is super cool. He did a rap from Moana with some dude interviewing him for The Guy's Kids, because The Guy's Kids were massive Moana fans. I reckon he's so nice that on the aeroplane, I bet how he let the person next to him have the armrest. He probably thought, this isn't The Rock's elbow room, this is the people's elbow room. I met John Candy on a plane when I was a little kid while traveling with my family. He was a big man. He had the whole row to himself in front of us with the armrest up between seats so he could be more comfortable. The stewardesses were blocking anyone from coming up and bothering him, even though they themselves were not exactly leaving him alone, what with talking to him constantly and laughing at his enjoyable banter the whole trip. At some point he got up to go to the bathroom. When he came back he looked at me, pretended to do a double take, like he was surprised and said, "Hey, you're the quietest kid ever, don't you talk?" The way he said it was so friendly that I just smiled and giggled. Then he had a pleasant conversation with my parents, who had been dying to talk to him the entire flight, but were too polite to bother him. Not even 2 weeks later we heard he had passed. Did he take his shoes and socks off? Dogs are barking. Ha. Actually I remember he had a very inexpensive, almost cheap looking, cardigan sweater on. Had it been anyone other than John Candy, I don't think anyone would have paid this man any mind at all. We saw him one more time, after disembarking the plane. There were 2 men waiting for him at the luggage pickup area, both impeccable dressed. They had hand-stitched logos on their blazers that said Hatteras Yachts. I guess Mr. Candy was there to buy a boat or something. Sad to think he likely never got a chance to enjoy it. My only experience with Guy Fieri thus far was cordial. Did a guest presentation for us and took plenty of photos. But every time there's a wildfire or other depressing thing going on around here, he has his second responder crew ready to feed and care for all the first responders. Bumped into Gordon Ramsay in the lift in a hotel in Hong Kong. He was very friendly. We didn't talk to him or ask for a picture. I just blurted out, "You're Gordon Ramsay," and he acknowledged and smiled. He insisted on us going first because we had our suitcases with us, wished us a nice day, said bye several times when we saw him in the lobby again. Very friendly. Got the chance to meet him a few years back, and he really is a pretty nice guy. Just has a low tolerance for bullcrud. Jamie Lee Curtis. I worked with special needs young adults and was with a client at GameStop. A woman walked in with a teenager and they were shopping around. We were the only customers there, and when she asked for help from an associate, I loved the way she spoke. I went to ask her where she was from and stopped before blurting out, "Wow, has anyone told you that you look exactly like Jamie Lee Curtis?" To which she smiled and replied, "That's because I'm her." I apologized and let her get back to her shopping. Afterward, as she was about to leave, I asked her if it would be alright if I called my wife and told her where it was I ran into her. I didn't know if she wanted her location blasted, and she said of course. Want to take a picture? Absolute solid human. Love her.